People know me as Ben, though my full name is Benjamin Archer. I've been married to Scarlett for 4 years now. We haven't had kids yet because we value our freedom too much. Maybe we'll reconsider someday, but not until we're older. We both grew up in poor neighborhoods just a few streets apart, though we didn't meet until we were 18 at a college recruitment event. Scarlett excelled in college and went on to become an accountant and credit controller, whereas I struggled academically and never graduated. However, I've always had a strong work ethic and a head for business. By the time I was 15, I was working as a cleaner in local stores and offices, and by 18, I was managing a team of 30 employees and had contracts with several big companies in town. Scarlett was looking for a job and more staff when she approached my table at the event. She handed me her resume and said, "I'm not interested in a cleaning job, but you might want my phone number." I called her before she even reached the next table and asked her out to dinner the following evening. 4 years later, we got married. That event also helped Scarlett land a job in the purchasing department of an engineering firm, starting at the bottom. After 8 years, she worked her way up to head both the purchasing and credit control departments. As a result, we enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle with dual incomes and no children. Meanwhile, my business thrived, becoming the city's largest office and store cleaning company after acquiring 2 competitors. Cleaners and security guards are often the first to notice anything unusual in offices, and word gets around quickly. About 4 months ago, while I was at my desk, my secretary told me there was a man waiting to see me in the reception area. She handed me his business card, which read, "Blake Mitchell, Private Detective." I told her to bring him in. When he arrived, I greeted him, shook his hand, and asked what brought him to see me. After some small talk, he sat down and smiled. "Before we get into it, could I have some coffee? I haven't had a drop all day, and I'm desperate for a cup," he said. I understood completely. Caffeine is essential for most business owners. My secretary quickly brought us 2 mugs from the office coffee machine. With milk and sugar already on the table, neither of us touched them. After some initial chit-chat, I steered the conversation to the matter at hand. "So Blake, how can I help you?" He didn't waste any time. "Just call me Blake. As my card says, I'm a private investigator. I'm working for a client who suspects his wife might be having an affair, or is close to it. She's an accountant at Stevens Piping, a company that gets supplies from AM Metals. AM Metals recently hired a new salesman, Graham Sinclair. Sinclair has a reputation for chasing after married women. He's been whining and dining my client's wife, sending flowers, late-night texts, the whole 9 yards. It's all pretty typical, but now he's pushing for an overnight trip. We've gathered a lot of information, but we need to fill in the final gaps." I was intrigued. The whole spy scenario was kind of amusing, but AM Metals rang a bell. Scarlett's company also buys materials from them, and this Sinclair guy sounded like someone I'd rather keep Scarlett away from. I looked up and saw Blake waiting for my response. "I get the picture, but how can I assist?" I asked. He grinned. "I was hoping you'd ask. It's simple. Sinclair leaves flowers, notes, and other items on her desk. She reads them and throws them away. Your staff handles the trash. They can collect anything personal from him and pass it on to us. We'll review it with our legal team. Collecting personal items isn't illegal, and we've got clearance from her employer. Here's the authorization to gather information. By cooperating, they avoid potential legal issues related to her contract's fraternization clause. If you're curious why they agreed, here's the CEO's card. Call him to confirm." The CEO's number was already in my phone. Without a word to Blake, I dialed. He answered on the second ring and said, "Ben, I understand Blake Mitchell is with you. I authorize you to receive and pass on any non-company related information to him or his team. Our lawyer is drafting a formal letter which we'll email you. I've got to go. He's waiting in my office. Call me if you need anything else." With that, he hung up before I could respond. Clearly they wanted this dealt with quickly. Blake smiled at me. I nodded and said, "He confirmed what you said. Give me all the details and we'll start collecting her trash in a separate bag. I'll sort through it here and you can pick it up every morning at 11. Does that work for you?" Blake agreed. "It's perfect." I then called the crew leader, and Blake gave us instructions on what to look for. Early lunches, late lunches, flowers, notes, and so on. We worked with Blake for about 6 weeks. At the end of that time, he announced the investigation was over. One of my employees noticed the subject didn't return after lunch. We called Blake and told him. He followed them to a motel, and the marriage ended in divorce. Work and family life went back to normal until one day Scarlett seemed a bit off. I tried to ask her about it, but she kept quiet. About a week later, Donna, a longtime employee who had been with me almost from the start, came into my office. Donna was a trusted employee and a friend. Being 25 years older, she treated me like a son. As she sat down, I sensed something was wrong. Then she began, "Remember a few months back when we were involved in that surveillance at the office?" My interest was piqued. How could I forget? It was quite an interesting time. Why do you bring it up? I raised an eyebrow to show my curiosity. Well, she paused. As you know, I now work in the same office as your wife, and the man we were monitoring has been visiting her office. I noticed a large bouquet of flowers, and she took them with her to lunch. Here's the card that came with the flowers. Donna handed me the card, and I read it. Dear Scarlett, thank you for helping me renew my contract with your company. I can't tell you how grateful I am. I hope you'll join me for lunch so we can catch up. With love, Graham. My heart sank. The words on the card made it clear that this wasn't their first personal interaction, and their relationship was dangerously close to crossing the line. I remembered Blake mentioning how this guy was known for chasing after married women, and now Scarlett was his target. I thanked Donna and asked her to keep an eye on things, giving me daily updates if she noticed anything else. I told her to bring any new notes to me immediately. Without wasting a moment, I picked up the phone and called Blake. He answered on the third ring. Hello, Ben. How can I help you? I got straight to the point. One of my staff just reported something. She used to handle the nightly cleanup during your investigation, and now she's working in my wife's office. Donna said that Sinclair is making moves on my wife, even taking her out to lunch. I've got a card from him with flowers, clearly showing his intentions. Blake took a deep breath. Our investigation into Sinclair is ongoing. You're actually the third husband involved right now. The difference is the other two didn't know who he was initially. They've agreed to share expenses. Would you like to join them? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. What's the next step? Blake suggested we meet with the other husbands at 2 p.m. Can you come by my office to meet, fill out the necessary paperwork, and exchange information? I agreed and arrived at 1:55 p.m. sharp. At Blake's office, I met Oliver Callahan and Toby Prescott, along with Blake and his associate, Owen Fletcher, who was gathering data on the case. Blake started the meeting. Gentlemen, we're here because you three share a common problem. Oliver, Toby, meet Ben. He's interested in joining your investigation. If you're agreeable, we'll register him as a client and facilitate the information exchange. They looked at me, then at Blake, and said, Yes, that sounds good. We filled out the paperwork, which took about 15 minutes. After that, I used my personal credit card to cover the $5,000 fee, so Scarlett wouldn't see the transaction. Blake then addressed the three of us. Our shared problem is Graham Sinclair. Ben, to bring you up to speed, Oliver's wife works with Sinclair at AM Metals, while Toby's wife is employed by the school board, which buys metals for tech classes. Sinclair has a well-practiced routine. He goes after women at their workplaces with flowers, messages, and lunches, often trying to lure them to a motel afterward. He uses the same tactics with married women, pushing those with kids into cheating and coercing childless women to ask their husbands for free passes. He seems to enjoy knowing the husbands are aware he's wooing their wives. He sets up weekend getaways. Over the past year, we've tracked at least 5 divorces in our area caused by him. Further investigation showed he used to work in Dallas, where he was fired after being sued by 7 husbands in a class-action lawsuit for alienation of affection. This guy is a real piece of work. Blake paused to sip his coffee. Ben, are you cleaning at AM Metals or the school district office? I shook my head. No, we're not. That's too bad, Blake said. But keep gathering trash from your wife's bin. Who pays your wife's phone bill? My business does, I replied. Blake grinned. What's her model phone? Samsung, I answered. Great. Fill out this form to give us permission to access data from her phone, he said, handing me a paper with a QR code. Scan this code on her phone. It will take you to our server. Use the username and password provided, and a program will be installed on her device, sending all calls, messages, emails, and WhatsApp chats to us. We know he typically uses a mobile phone to avoid spouses accidentally answering calls on home lines. The meeting ended with Oliver, Toby, and me swapping phone numbers and setting up a WhatsApp group with Blake and Owen for easy communication. When I got home, Scarlett was already there, looking preoccupied and clutching her phone. She seemed distant during our conversation, and even took her phone with her to feed the dog, which was unusual. When I asked about her day, she just said she was tired after an odd day, and went to bed at 9:32, much earlier than usual. I stayed up until our regular bedtime, then looked for her phone. It wasn't in its usual spot, so I went to our bedroom. I saw a telephone cord near the bed and, on closer inspection, found her phone under her pillow. It was impossible to get it without waking her, so I went to bed troubled by the situation. Fortunately, she got up in the middle of the night, giving me a chance to quickly scan the QR code, input the details, and return her phone unnoticed before she came back. The next morning, she wandered around the house aimlessly before leaving for work. Around 11:30 a.m., Owen called from Blake's office. They had finished analyzing the initial data dump. He started explaining, "She created a new email account just for him. This actually helps us. We didn't know how they were communicating initially, but now we're trying to hack into his email. His messages are very persuasive. He convinced her to talk about how you were her first and only, suggesting she needed to try new experiences to spice up the marriage. She shared intimate details of your life, which he used to his advantage. He hinted at making your sex life more exciting, and probably proposed a weekend getaway during their recent lunch. Blake informed me, Hez now arguing it's purely physical, and insists that if she truly loves you, it won't count as cheating. He's using guilt to manipulate her." Reflecting on Scarlett's behavior last night, she seemed so absorbed in her thoughts, barely acknowledging my presence either last night or this morning. I asked Blake, "Are they still in contact or planning another meeting?" Owen reviewed the messages and said, "The latest one just came in. Let's meet for lunch at the beach club tomorrow and strategize. Ben loves you, and if you tell him, it won't be considered cheating. He can't deny you a free pass." Her response was simply, "Okay." After ending the call with Owen, I leaned back, pondering my next move. Confronting her directly wouldn't solve anything. He'd just find another way to get to her, maybe even a motel rendezvous. No, I had to either put a stop to this or end our marriage. I called Blake again. "It seems he's making a blatant move on Scarlett and flaunting it in my face. Even if I step in, hell, just find another way, maybe a motel trip. I need a plan to end this or to end our marriage. I'm considering filing for divorce, but I think I need a backup plan, though I'm not sure what that looks like yet. What do you think?" Blake paused briefly before responding. "Having a backup plan is wise, but if it fails, he won't give up. I know his type. His ego won't let her slip away. If forgiveness isn't an option, divorce might be the only choice. He'll prepare a packet of documents for your attorney, or I can recommend mine." "I have my own, thanks," I replied. He drafted a business agreement protected by a trust in case of divorce. I contacted my lawyer and scheduled a meeting for the next morning at 9:30. The next day, when I arrived at his office, he looked me over and said, "Who changed it?" I chuckled. He knew me too well. With a cup of coffee from his secretary, I began. "Scarlett is on the verge of cheating on me. A salesman at her workplace is after her, and she's falling for it. Now I have no choice but to plan for the worst. I'm devising a backup plan to stop this, but if she cheats, plan A goes out the window." We spent the next hour discussing options. I leaned towards a straightforward divorce. Our business, protected by the agreement, would be divided evenly. With no children, there was no need for child support, and the house would be sold. I didn't want to pursue legal action against Sinclair or his employer. It was too costly with slim chances of success. We sealed our agreement with a handshake, and after settling the fee, I left. He promised to finalize all documents and keep them ready for future reference. Scarlett's behavior was erratic throughout the week. One evening she was affectionate, and the next she barely acknowledged me. On Friday afternoon, Donna called to inform me that Scarlett had received a large bouquet of flowers and a postcard. That was the final straw for me. I messaged the WhatsApp group and noticed Blake's post to Oliver, inviting her to dinner at the Holiday Inn. We knew his intentions, but the matter remained unresolved. Urgently, I encouraged Oliver to join me, hoping he would resolve his situation soon. I longed for a similar resolution in my own life. I was so distracted that I kept dropping things. I messaged the group, telling Owen about the flowers and the message on the card. His response was swift. "I'll check her email now. Nothing so far." 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Without disconnecting, Owen directed me to check my WhatsApp. Opening the app, I found a document he had sent. It was a confirmation for a hotel reservation at a lakeside spot about 30 miles from the city. The booking was for a double room for the upcoming Friday and Saturday, listing two names, Sinclair and Scarlett. Returning to the call, I relayed the grim news. Owen sighed and confirmed, "Yes, but the email is even worse." He described the contents. It was a cheater's guide written by Scarlett, detailing what to say and do. He promised to forward it to me. When the email landed in my inbox, I read through a series of messages with the subject line, "Weekend." It all started around 2 weeks ago when he sent her a link to the same hotel he eventually booked. In these exchanges, he expressed his desire to pamper her and suggested various forms of entertainment. Subsequent emails asked her thoughts on the matter and criticized me for supposedly not making her happy. In the final message, he outlined the reservation details and provided a script of what to say and do to persuade me. It was essentially a manual for cheating, advising her to cook a lavish dinner the following Thursday, engage in frequent intimacy throughout the week, and assert that it would be purely physical with him, yet enriching. He appealed to her love for me, leaving the decision in her hands. It remained to be seen whether I would fall for it. I needed time to think about my next move. The weekend was exhausting. I couldn't reveal that I knew, but she was unusually kind. We were intimate on Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night, continuing into Sunday. She initiated another encounter on Sunday afternoon, and we had a brief encounter on Monday morning. Blake called at 3 o'clock on Monday with disturbing news about the email. He told me the situation was dire. According to Blake, she messaged Sinclair, suggesting a meeting for Thursday night. If Sinclair declined, she wouldn't go through with it, but if he accepted, she would. Blake added that if Sinclair felt uneasy, he should remember that seeking forgiveness is easier than seeking permission. I thanked Blake and asked him to compile a folder with all relevant documents. I asked about intimate photographs. He confirmed their existence. I heard the shuffling of papers as he found a photograph of them kissing, though not passionately. I instructed him to include everything in the folder, with that photograph as the cover page, and to forward the entire package to my attorney. Blake promised he would handle everything. I then called my lawyer, warning him about the folder he'd soon receive. We agreed to meet at the hotel on Saturday morning over breakfast to go over it. Few things cause heartburn like a divorce petition, I joked. On Monday night, Scarlett wanted to get close, but I made an excuse about having important work to finish. I stayed in my office, drowning myself in tasks until 2 a.m., finally going to bed to find her already asleep. Despite the late hour, I slept soundly and woke up at 6 o'clock to head to work, just before she could make any morning advances. A courier delivered the awaited folder. Sitting in my office, I flipped through its contents, noting the seductive undertone in Scarlett's messages. She had a knack for allure that was unpredictable but effective. Blake included accounts, without names, of at least 7 marriages Sinclair had wrecked in the past 18 months. There was also a note from Oliver detailing a disturbing incident at the Holiday Inn involving his wife Sinclair and himself. Oliver's wife had fled in tears, and Blake had to step in and take Oliver home. The couple had started counseling, hoping to save their marriage for the sake of their 3 young children. As I read through the folder, my secretary entered, her gaze unwavering. Overcome with emotion, I confided in her, telling her everything. She asked about my plans, and for the first time I smiled, recognizing her not just as a secretary, but as a friend offering support. I also noticed something I hadn't before, her undeniable charm. Returning my smile, she said, "What's good for the goose is good for the gander." She suggested, "Why not have your own weekend with your dream girl?" I couldn't help but smile back. "And who might that be?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Me, of course," she replied. "Your loyal secretary, here to help you clear your mind. It's strictly about physical release, nothing to do with your marriage. Use this letter as a guide and send it to her before she does the same to you." The plan was simple, yet effective, forcing Scarlett to confront her own betrayal. Tuesday night, I was intimate with my wife, but there was no emotion in it. Wednesday morning, neither of us wanted a quick encounter. By Wednesday evening, the tension had eased slightly, but only just. Thursday morning, as I left the house, Scarlett called out about dinner, but I ignored her. Around noon, Blake called, saying Scarlett had messaged Sinclair, boasting about preparing a special dinner for me and promising to update him afterward. To preempt her, I went to the store and bought chicken, potatoes, and vegetables for baking, along with a bottle of her favorite white wine. By 2:30, I was back home, and within 2 hours, everything was ready and in the oven. Just as I was placing the potatoes to bake, Scarlett arrived with shopping bags, looking puzzled. "What are you up to?" she asked. "Just preparing dinner for my lovely wife. Wanted to make it special before we sit down for a chat," I said with a broad grin. She looked taken aback. "Oh, I was going to cook dinner too, but after we eat, I have something important to discuss. It's going to be a long night." "Of course," I replied, smiling. Dinner proceeded tensely. I kept the conversation flowing, deflecting any attempts to shift the focus onto me, urging her to enjoy the meal before we shared our news. Once we finished, I took the lead. "Bring your wine to the kitchen. We can talk there," I suggested. She followed me. Earlier, I had discreetly placed a folder with a letter outlining her excuses on the kitchen table, hidden beneath a couple of magazines. Now I removed the magazines, revealing the printed document. "Scarlett, you know I cherish you and would never hurt you," I began. "But we married young, and my lack of experience has become clear lately. My new secretary, Elena, has been confiding in me. Her stories are so captivating, I could listen for hours. I need to clear her from my mind before we commit to spending our lives together. I've arranged a hotel stay with her for the weekend. It'll be purely physical, a chance for me to blow off steam and learn some new techniques to try out with you later. This doesn't affect my love for you or our marriage. I'm telling you beforehand so it won't be seen as betrayal. I trust your love for me enough to allow me this one weekend outside our marriage, knowing it won't impact us." Scarlett's face turned crimson, and she looked ready to explode. "Over my dead body, and I want this woman gone by Monday morning, or we're finished," she declared. Her reaction eased my tension, and I burst into laughter, remarking on her expression. "Priceless," I said. Then realization dawned on her. Every response she had planned, I had anticipated. I closed the folder and handed it to her, revealing a photo of her kissing Sinclair on the cover. Her face turned ashen as she whispered, "You knew, and you played me." "Yes," I smiled. "Your reaction is exactly what mine would have been if the roles were reversed. Unlike you, I didn't book a hotel. Unlike you, Elena and I never shared lunches, kisses, or intimate conversations. My story was fiction. Yours is real." As I spoke, she flipped through the folder, seeing the full extent of my knowledge. Dates, times, photos, emails, call transcripts. Everything laid bare. Furious, she shouted, "You spied on me? Violated my privacy? How could you?" I remained calm. "That's all there is to it. It's time to decide. I love you, but you need to understand there's a boundary, and you've crossed it. You got yourself a boyfriend, engaged in an emotional affair, and plan to take it physical. You've humiliated me and jeopardized our marriage, and yet you're angry at me for trying to intervene. I thought we could work through this, but maybe I'm wrong," I said, my voice more sorrowful than angry. "What do you mean by humiliating you and wrecking our marriage?" "I never intended anything like that. It was separate from our marriage," she replied defensively, using words that sounded straight out of an infidelity handbook. "Listen to yourself," I echoed her words back to her. "You responded to me the same way I responded to you. So why is it okay for you to cheat, but not for me?" She took a deep breath, ready to argue, but I raised my hand to stop her. "There's no such thing as a free pass. If you go with Sinclair, it's cheating, plain and simple. Telling me beforehand doesn't change that." She averted her gaze, muttering, "I can't process this right now. I need to be alone." With that, she abruptly stood up and rushed upstairs, clutching the folder. I heard the bedroom door slam shut and the lock click. I tidied up the house, then sat down at the table. Blake had given me a tablet that tracked all of Scarlett's phone activity. Logging in, I saw she was messaging Sinclair. Reading through their conversations, I found her initial letter intriguing. She was worried about someone following them and having copies of their exchanges. She wrote about how when she got home, her partner had dinner ready and seemed to know her thoughts, which angered her. Later, he showed her a folder with all the details, including the hotel reservation. Unsure of what to do, Sinclair didn't see it as a problem. He suggested telling the other person that everything was booked and they had to follow through, emphasizing their love and questioning the other person's feelings. His desperation was evident. Trying to follow his advice, she faced resistance from her partner, who argued it would embarrass him and wreck their marriage. He insisted that even asking for permission would be considered cheating. Feeling conflicted, she couldn't go through with it, despite the potential enjoyment of the weekend. She couldn't risk her future with Ben. Seeing his disappointment, she realized all his efforts and resources had been wasted, and he decided to take a big risk. She was asked if she thought her husband would divorce her. She doubted it, expressing confidence that he wouldn't find another woman like her. The suggestion was made for her to pack her bag and bring it to work to gauge his reaction. If that didn't work, they would proceed with the weekend plan and seek forgiveness on Sunday. Despite recognizing the absurdity, she fell for the suggestion. She concluded that if it seemed like her husband might leave her, she wouldn't go through with it. She planned to see Sinclair the next day, as she started thinking more rationally. He knew how to reassure her. I put away the tablet and tried to watch TV, but my mind was preoccupied with everything. I decided to file for divorce on Saturday, though I considered postponing it. Once started, there would be no turning back. I phoned my lawyer and explained everything in detail. I dropped the bomb on her and Sinclair, informed her that I'd forgive her. She's planning to pack her bag to see how he'll react. I don't want to file for divorce until they've slept together. Is there any way we can show her how serious this is? My lawyer, always sharp, suggested we could give her a letter containing a preliminary claim. We simply state that you're aware she's planning to engage in an affair over the weekend, and if she proceeds, we'll start divorce proceedings on Saturday morning at the hotel. I agreed, expand the text a bit, and deliver it to her at her office, preferably with Sinclair present. What do you think? It'll show you mean business. She said Sinclair would pick her up for lunch. I suggest giving her the letter around 11 o'clock, regardless of his presence. Her employer would understand. He's traditional and won't approve of her actions. But what would really upset him is if a process server showed up and caused a scene. About an hour later, my lawyer sent me a draft of the letter, perfectly suited to the situation. It detailed all the relevant information and made it clear she'd be served on Saturday morning. I confirmed my approval. I checked the tablet again, but found no new messages between Scarlett and Sinclair, so I went to bed. I tried to open the bedroom door, expecting it to be locked, but it was unlocked. Inside, Scarlett was lying in bed, seemingly expecting a romantic encounter. Her packed bag was against the wall on her side of the bed. Seeing her decision, I said, "So you've chosen a quick fling with Sinclair over our marriage." Without waiting for a response, I left the room and headed to the guest room, ignoring her pleas as I walked away. Lying on the bed, fully clothed, I realized the letters were not a true reflection of reality, but seeing her bag packed for a rendezvous with another man felt like a deep betrayal. Overwhelmed by grief and a profound sense of loss, tears streamed down my face through the night. The next morning I heard Scarlett descending the stairs. I retreated into our bedroom to shower and change, only to realize my bag was no longer there. Had she taken it downstairs, unpacked it, and stowed it away? After showering, I smelled coffee and bacon. Heading to the kitchen, I saw her nervously making breakfast. My initial reaction was to confront her, not holding back. "I suppose this lavish spread is your attempt to show what kind of wife you'll be if you sleep with another man. But it won't sway me. If you go through with this, it's over between us," I stated firmly, making it clear where I stood. "My lawyer and I have agreed that divorce papers will be served to you tomorrow morning at breakfast. Once delivered, there will be no turning back. If you come home tonight, we can start counseling to rebuild trust and avoid this happening again. But if you leave with him, don't even think about coming back. You won't be welcome here." She pleaded, "Please stay for breakfast. We need to talk." I turned to face her. "We've already talked. Your packed bag shows you're not interested in dialogue. I won't be having breakfast here. It's time you learn to fend for yourself. I assume your bag is already in your car?" She looked away, confirming my suspicions, and left the house in silence. At least she understood the seriousness of her actions. When I arrived at the office, Elena noticed right away. "You look awful," she said. I forced a weak smile. "And you look as stunning as ever." Before she could ask more, I added, "When I confronted her with Plan B, she flew into a rage, demanding your termination. She even said, 'Only over my dead body.' Then she stormed off. I packed my weekend bag this morning. She'll receive a letter from me at 11 o'clock with a directive. Let's see if that shakes her up. As I spoke, Elena brewed some coffee and handed me a cup. I hope she realizes how serious this is. She can't possibly think it's acceptable for her to behave this way, but not for you, she said. I offered a sad smile and sat down, knowing I wouldn't get much done today. Shortly after 11, my phone rang. It was Scarlett, her voice trembling with tears. Are you really serious about divorcing me? She clearly believed I wouldn't go through with it. If you betray me, it's a breach of our agreement. You'd divorce me if I cheated, right? Her reply was barely audible, but it was a firm yes. She pleaded, will you come home so we can talk? I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and hung up. When I got home, I made some coffee, the smell of bacon from earlier still in the air. I opened the kitchen window and sat down to eat. Scarlett came in 10 minutes later, holding an envelope from the lawyer and her weekend bag slung over her shoulder. She dropped the bag at the door and hesitated, unsure whether to approach me. I gestured for her to join me at the table. So, are you still planning to go to the hotel? How can you even ask that after sending this? She exclaimed. Of course I'm not going. I love you. I want to be with you. I know you'd never allow it, so everything is canceled. Do we need to fix our marriage, or will I still be served? I looked at her, lifting her chin to meet my eyes. You'll only be served if you go to the hotel. No hotel, no papers. But our marriage is damaged. Here's what needs to happen. First, you'll call Sinclair in front of me and tell him it's over. Then, you'll delete your personal email account. After that, you'll inform your boss about Sinclair's behavior and ask that he be removed from your office. Finally, we'll start counseling to understand why this happened and how we can rebuild trust. Just as I finished, her phone rang. It was Sinclair. She put it on speaker, and we heard him say, Where are you, Scarlett? I'm waiting for you at the reception and can't wait any longer. Taking a deep breath, she replied, Graham, I'm at home with Ben. Something happened that made me realize if I go with you, my marriage will be over. I'm sorry, but you're not worth it. I'm not going. His anger was palpable, but Scarlett stood her ground, ending the call and looking at me with a mix of relief and fear. You foolish cow. Do you have any idea how much effort, time, and money I've invested in you? And now you're backing out because your weakling husband is throwing a fit? You're just a powerhouse. Screw you, Graham yelled before hanging up. For the first time, Scarlett saw him for who he truly was, a manipulative slime ball. Deleting her email account took longer than we thought, but we managed it within an hour. By the time we finished, her boss and the HR manager, Landon, were at our door. Scarlett, we're aware of what happened today, Landon began. To say we're disappointed is an understatement. However, we're here to give you a chance to keep your job. Now please tell us what occurred. Scarlett dabbed her eyes with a tissue before speaking. About 3 months ago, our account was assigned to a new sales agent, Graham Sinclair. I managed this account, and he started visiting me daily. At first I didn't notice, but he began flirting, complimenting my attire, hairstyle, and even my smile. Gradually, he commented on my physique and appearance. I fell for it and started dressing more provocatively. He sent gifts like flowers and chocolates, and then invited me to dinner. Foolishly, I accepted. During dinner, he asked personal questions about my life, my husband, and eventually our intimate life. He belittled my husband, claiming he was unworthy of me. It was a slow process, wearing me down bit by bit. Then he proposed a weekend getaway, but luckily, Ben intervened. He handed me a letter stating he was divorcing me, which snapped me out of it. I told Graham I wouldn't go and that Ben and I were working to save our marriage. I intended to report the incident formally, so I'm grateful you're here. Landon glanced at the CEO, who nodded before addressing Scarlett. Thank you for your honesty, Scarlett. Yes, this was a significant error on your part, but you're fortunate to keep your job. We've had issues with AM Metal's product quality, so we're closing their account, and Sinclair will be permanently removed from our office. However, if anything like this happens again, you'll be dismissed immediately. Understood? Scarlett nodded meekly. Yes. They left, and we had lunch before starting our search for a marriage counselor. We found one relatively quickly and scheduled an appointment for the following day. After making the arrangements, we exchanged glances. I took Scarlett's hand and led her to bed. We made love, and later, as we lay together, I drifted off to sleep with my head resting on her chest. I woke up around 5 a.m., and we shared a tender moment, perhaps the first genuine one since her involvement with Sinclair. The counseling sessions were fruitful. Scarlett realized that Sinclair had exploited her fears of our life becoming dull and routine. She saw how she had unwittingly given him the information he needed to manipulate her. I learned that, for Sinclair, it was all just a game. Through this process, I came to appreciate the richness of our life together and realized we didn't need anyone else to guide us. The counseling lasted 3 months. 4 years later, we're still happily together, and Scarlett is expecting our first child. As for Mr. Sinclair, he suffered a nasty fall at our local shopping center while descending the stairs to the parking lot. The circumstances remain a mystery, but there were at least 5 husbands at the mall that day who had reasons to dislike him, all dressed in black attire and baseball caps. We gathered at the scene, moving around so it was impossible to tell who was present and who wasn't. Despite the police's efforts to separate us and get information, none of us spoke up. I am certain one of us was responsible, but we'll never know who.